Beneath the ice, the Lake Vostok expedition and its mysteries, a frozen time capsule. In the coldest corner of our planet, a secret lay hidden under the ice for millions of years. Lake Vostok, a vast subglacial lake buried beneath over 2 miles of Antarctic ice, was like a time capsule from a prehistoric Earth. No sunlight had touched its waters in at least 15 million years. Many believed that whatever was sealed down there might have evolved in complete isolation, a potential treasure trove of new life forms or ancient secrets. Scientists around the world were captivated by the idea. A pristine lake in total darkness, perhaps harboring extremophile microbes, or who knew what else, surviving in an alien-like environment. It was as if Antarctica held its own little alien ocean, a mirror to the hidden seas of Jupiter's icy moons. But to unlock that mystery, someone would have to pierce through those miles of ice and actually reach the lake. By the early 2010s, a team of Russian scientists at Vostok Station was closing in on that goal. Vostok Station itself is one of the most remote and inhospitable outposts on Earth, famous for recording the coldest temperature ever observed on the planet. A mind-numbing 89.4 degrees C where even your breath can freeze in midair. The researchers there live in complete isolation, battling polar nights, howling winds, and air so cold it hurts to breathe. Yet despite the brutal conditions, these scientists had a grand mission fueling them: to be the first humans ever to reach Lake Vostok and see what lay beneath the ancient ice. It was a mix of high adventure and high science, a true race against time and nature at the bottom of the world, racing against darkness. The year 2012 marked the final phase of this decades-long quest. The Russian team had been drilling painstakingly for years, boring a narrow shaft down through layer after layer of ice core. Each meter they cut through was like going backward in time, past ice-age snow and volcanic ash from bygone eras. They were within a few dozen meters of the lake's surface, and anticipation was sky-high. But so was the pressure, literally and figuratively. February was approaching, and with it the end of the brief Antarctic summer. Soon the temperatures would plummet even further, and the encroaching winter would make it impossible to continue. If they didn't break through before winter, they'd have to wait many long months or even another year to try again. The world was watching. Other international teams were working on accessing smaller subglacial lakes, but Lake Vostok was the grand prize, the largest subglacial lake on the continent, roughly the size of Lake Ontario, hidden under ice thicker than the height of Mount Everest's base camp. It was now or never for the Russian crew. Day after day in January 2012, they drilled deeper. They worked in round-the-clock shifts despite the dangers and exhaustion. Outside the drill tent, the polar wind screamed over a landscape of ice that stretched to every horizon. Inside, each scientist bundled in layers of clothing and focus, they watched the gauges and sensors as the drill descended meter by meter. They were tantalizingly close, and everyone's nerves were on edge. Communication lines were open to the outside world via satellite phone, and colleagues in other parts of Antarctica and back home in Russia awaited news. Everyone knew the deadline. By early February, the station needed to be shut down for winter. The scientists at Vostok Station were racing the clock, and it was ticking towards an uncertain finish. Would they strike the ancient water in time? And if they did, what would happen? No one had ever done something like this before, tapping a lake sealed under such immense pressure. Some worried about contamination of the lake, others about a violent rush of water up the borehole. But these concerns were overshadowed by excitement. Then, just as the drill was poised to breach the final stretch of ice, something unexpected happened. Silence. The outside world lost contact with Vostok Station. The silence in Antarctica. For several days in early February 2012, an eerie quiet fell over the communications channels. The Russian drilling team went radio silent. No updates, no crackling phone calls, just nothing. Given the extreme environment of inland Antarctica, communication outages weren't unheard of, but the timing was unsettling. They had been so close to the goal. Back home and at other research bases, scientists and loved ones held their breath. 6 days passed with no word from Lake Vostok. Imagine the scene. An endless night of Antarctic winter is only days away, temperatures dropping lower each day, and a small group of researchers is isolated hundreds of miles from the nearest neighbor. Did a blizzard knock out their comms? Had they packed up in a hurry to escape the freezing trap of winter? Or had something gone wrong with the drilling? The mind could run wild with possibilities in that silence. News outlets picked up the story of the missing scientists in Antarctica. Around the globe, people anxiously waited for any scrap of information. Those who knew the drilling team tried to stay optimistic. Perhaps it was a mere technical glitch, a failed satellite phone battery, or a storm overhead interfering with signals. Maybe the team was simply too busy with the final drilling operations to check in. After all, the last stretch of drilling was critical and time-consuming. But as day after day passed with no contact, even seasoned polar scientists began to worry. The temperatures outside were already around 40 degrees and falling. If something had gone awry, rescue wasn't really an option. Not in that remote location, not with winter's darkness about to swallow the continent. The Antarctic winter is unforgiving. In a matter of days, the station would become inaccessible, entombed in ice and night for months. Whispers of worst-case scenarios started to circulate. Had they perhaps drilled into the lake and hit a pocket of pressurized water or gas that caused an accident? Could there have been an issue with their generators or heaters? Something catastrophic like a fire or a sudden freeze? The imaginations of those following the story ran rampant, colored by the very real danger of the situation. It was a suspenseful wait, with a palpable sense that something historic, whether triumphant or tragic, was unfolding in that silent white wilderness. Breaking through to an alien lake, at last, on February 5, 2012, a crackling message finally made it out from Vostok Station. Success. The team had broken through the ice and reached Lake Vostok. The radio silence ended not with a tragedy, but with a triumphant announcement. Relief washed over the scientific community. The Russian scientists were alive and well, and they had done it. After more than 30 years of intermittent drilling, they had pierced the icy lid of Lake Vostok, the first humans to ever access this primordial lake. When the drill reached the final few meters, the pressurized water from below actually surged up the borehole, like a hidden ocean eager to meet the surface after eons of solitude. The team had anticipated this. They weren't using an ordinary drill, but one filled with special fluid, a mix of kerosene and freon, to keep the hole from refreezing. As the lake water rushed upward, it mixed with these fluids and quickly froze, forming a plug of refrozen lake water in the borehole. This was crucial. It prevented the lake from gushing out uncontrollably and also sealed off the lake again from the outside environment. Essentially, Lake Vostok burped up a sample of itself for them, which then froze into the drill core. The scientists extracted a cylinder of that frozen lake water, the first sample ever retrieved from the lake. It was cloudy, primordial ice now sitting in their gloved hands. In that moment, those researchers were holding something that had been locked away since a time when early human ancestors were barely learning to walk upright. It was a piece of a lost world. One can only imagine the exhilaration, and perhaps a bit of nervousness, that came with that achievement. Outside, the polar wind still howled and the temperature kept dropping. But inside the small research station, there must have been cheers, hugs, maybe even tears of joy. They didn't have long to celebrate. The clock was still ticking on their departure. They had to secure the station for winter and evacuate before the weather made it impossible. The borehole was sealed deliberately to preserve the lake and to allow for future exploration with minimal contamination. The precious ice core sample was carefully packed. Soon the team would begin their long journey home, leaving Lake Vostok once again in darkness and silence, at least until the next season. When news of the successful lake breach hit the outside world, it was met with jubilation and curiosity. What had they found in that water? Was there life down there? In the following months, back in St. Petersburg and other labs, Russian scientists cautiously thawed and analyzed the Vostok ice sample. At first, they reported that they found hints of microbial life, bacteria, in the water. In fact, there was talk of a new type of bacterium, something perhaps only 86% similar to known species, which if true would mean a potentially new branch on the tree of life. For a moment, it seemed Lake Vostok might indeed harbor unique life forms, though not sea monsters, at least not yet. However, science is a careful, methodical process. Other experts raised questions. Could those microbes have been contaminants brought in by the drilling fluid or human contact? A bit of back and forth ensued in the scientific community. Some initial claims of novel life were walked back, then revisited. Eventually, it was confirmed that yes, there were signs of life, traces of DNA from microorganisms, even snippets that resembled marine species like small crustaceans and fungi. These likely came from the lake, perhaps wafted there through cracks in the ice from the ocean ages ago, or relics of an older ecosystem. But importantly, nothing big swam out of the hole at them, and no clear evidence of fish or larger organisms was found in that first sampling. If Lake Vostok had any complex life, it remained hidden in the depths for now. In fact, the official reports from the Russian team were a bit underwhelming to the public. Nothing of much biological interest was recovered, they said. For scientists, even a few strains of hardy bacteria in that water were incredibly exciting. Proof that life can endure in one of the most extreme environments on Earth. But to the wider audience who had followed this dramatic mission, expecting who knows what, this quiet result felt anticlimactic. And as so often happens when a grand buildup ends quietly, some began to wonder if the whole truth was being told. Rumors in the aftermath. With the successful drill and safe return of the team, one chapter of the Lake Vostok saga closed. But a new, stranger chapter was about to begin. The absence of dramatic discoveries left a blank canvas that imagination was all too eager to fill. Soon whispers and rumors started to spread, especially online and in sensational media. People asked, why had communication really been lost for those days? Was it truly just technical difficulties, or was something hushed up during that time? The stage was set for conspiracy theories to bloom, and bloom they did. Not long after the expedition, bizarre stories began cropping up on fringe websites, forums, and tabloids. One claim in particular sent shivers down the spines of the curious. 2 of the Russian scientists had died during the mission under mysterious circumstances. According to these rumors, something terrible had happened in those silent days when the world couldn't reach the Vostok team. Some versions insinuated that the scientists were killed by a freak accident deep in the borehole. Others hinted at something far more sinister, an encounter with an unknown force beneath the ice. The official records, of course, showed no such deaths. Every member of the expedition that drilled into Lake Vostok in 2012 returned home alive, as far as all legitimate sources are concerned. But the allure of the missing scientists mystery was powerful. The idea that perhaps there had been casualties that were covered up for some reason started to gain traction in the shadowy corners of the internet. It didn't help that during the radio silence, even reputable news outlets had headlines like, "Missing Scientists in Antarctica," which primed the public to think something dire might have occurred. Human nature abhors an information vacuum, and those 6 days of silence were a perfect vacuum. Into it poured speculation. What if those researchers saw something they weren't supposed to? What if they accidentally released a danger from that ice-sealed lake? The world had visions of the thing and other horror tales set in Antarctica. It was only a matter of time before someone claimed exactly that something down there fought back. And indeed, one of the most sensational legends to emerge was about to take on a life of its own, a tale of a monster in the lake. The creature in the lake. From the realm of conspiracy and horror fiction came a story so outrageous and terrifying that it captured imaginations worldwide. It's the kind of tale that sounds like a blockbuster movie plot. The Russian team didn't just find water and microbes in Lake Vostok. They encountered a living creature, a predator lurking in that pitch-black aquatic abyss. This creature even had a name in the stories, Organism 46b. According to the legend, a Russian scientist from the expedition, often named in these accounts as Dr. Anton Padalka, fled the country and revealed a shocking secret of what really happened during those lost days. As the story goes, when the drill hit the lake and the team sent down a small submersible or diver to collect samples, they came face to face with something previously unknown to science. Imagine a monstrous octopus-like being, but far more fearsome than any known octopus. Organism 46b was said to be 33 feet long, with 14 tentacles instead of the usual 8. Right away you realize this is no ordinary squid. But it gets wilder. This creature supposedly had abilities straight out of science fiction. The tale claims it could paralyze its prey from a distance, up to 150 feet away, by releasing a toxin into the water, almost like a venomous ink cloud. The team's first encounter, the story says, ended in tragedy when one of the divers suddenly froze in place, a tranquil smile on his face, as if hypnotized. In the darkness beneath the ice, the others watched in horror, as an invisible assailant then tore the helpless man apart in a red cloud of water. Organism 46B had struck, panicked but determined. The remaining team members allegedly returned later, armed and ready to capture or confront the creature. But Organism 46B was not done showcasing its bag of tricks. The legend describes an almost diabolical intelligence at play. On a subsequent dive, the scientists spotted what looked like a fellow diver in the distance, swimming toward them. Relief, maybe. Did someone from another team come to help? But that relief turned to terror when they realized it was the creature itself mimicking a human form in order to get close. This shape-shifting ability, the story recounts, allowed the octopus to approach and brutally dispatch another scientist before anyone could react. The nightmare only escalated. In one dramatic sequence, a female researcher managed to slice off one of the creature's tentacles with an axe. Imagine the courage that would take if this were real. The severed limb, however, had a life of its own, thrashing on the ice. That night, as the team tried to recover in their camp, the story claims the severed arm slithered across the ice and strangled the woman in her sleep. It's a scene of pure horror, the idea that even a piece of this beast was deadly. Ultimately, as this wild narrative goes, the survivors did the unthinkable. They managed to neutralize Organism 46B, perhaps by luring it into a tank. After an epic struggle of man versus monster in the freezing dark, they captured it alive. Victorious but shaken, the 5 remaining team members hauled the creature up out of the lake, bringing it to the surface. At this point, the tale takes a conspiratorial turn. Supposedly, they were met by Russian authorities who immediately ordered a cover-up. The official stance became that nothing of interest was found in Lake Vostok. The borehole was quickly sealed again. Indeed, it was sealed, but in reality as a planned step to prevent contamination. In the story, it's to keep the secret trapped below. And our whistleblower scientist claims that President Putin himself wanted the creature kept secret to study it as a potential biological weapon. Organism 46B, if you haven't guessed, is pure fiction. This entire account first appeared in a sensationalistic horror article, a piece of creative writing that got picked up and passed around as if it were a genuine report. No member of the Vostok team has ever spoken of any such creature, nor have any such divers or events existed in reality. But the power of the internet is such that many people read this yarn and thought, wow, could this be true? Did they really find a monster under the ice? The line between fact and fiction blurred. To this day, Organism 46B has become an urban legend. It's a staple of YouTube videos, creepy podcasts, and conspiracy forums. People dissect the story, debate it, embellish it further. In a way, Lake Vostok did produce a new life form. Not a biological one, but a modern myth. The idea of a giant, malevolent octopus stalking those dark waters is simply too deliciously scary to let go of, no matter how implausible. It's important to note, though, that this story has zero credible evidence behind it. It remains in the realm of science fiction and internet lore. Yet the fact such a story took hold so widely underscores something. The world was hungry for a dramatic tale out of Lake Vostok. The reality, microscopic bacteria in an ice core, just didn't satisfy that hunger. So the void was filled by a monster. And once a monster story is out there, it develops a life of its own. But Organism 46B was just the beginning. Other, even more far-fetched theories and stories would soon entwine themselves with Lake Vostok and Antarctica's mysteries. Ancient pyramids beneath the ice. Even as some people imagined monsters in the lake, others turned their eyes to the broader Antarctic landscape and began seeing traces of ancient civilizations. Around the same time as the Vostok drilling, a flurry of speculation arose about pyramid-shaped structures spotted in Antarctica. Photographs and satellite images circulated, showing what looked like huge triangular peaks jutting from the snow, remarkably symmetrical, like human-made pyramids. Could it be, some wondered, that Antarctica was once home to a lost civilization, and that they built pyramids just as the Egyptians did? The idea sounds straight out of a Hollywood adventure film. Under the Antarctic ice lies the remnants of Atlantis or an alien base, complete with pyramid monuments and maybe even frozen cities. For those who believe in alternative histories, that perhaps Antarctica wasn't always frozen, or that an advanced society predates our known history, Lake Vostok became part of that story too. They speculated. Maybe this ancient civilization left something in Lake Vostok, or the lake itself hides evidence of their existence. If Antarctica was once green, as it indeed was millions of years ago, could humans or someone else have lived there? The thought is thrilling. These pyramid photos were enticing. One of the most popular images showed a mountain with strikingly pyramid-like geometry against the flat white plain. It is real, but geologists quickly explained that it's simply a natural mountain known as a nunatak that's been exposed to extremely harsh winds from all directions, effectively carving it into a pyramidal shape. Nature can and does produce symmetrical forms, especially with the kind of constant katabatic winds Antarctica has. But of course, wind-shaped mountain doesn't spark the imagination nearly as much as ancient pyramid of a forgotten race. So on corners of YouTube and conspiracy blogs, you'd hear claims like Nazi explorers in the 1930s actually found these pyramids and kept them secret. Or the US military knows about them, and that's why there are so many international treaties restricting access to Antarctica. Some linked the pyramid idea with Plato's legend of Atlantis, suggesting that when Atlantis fell, maybe its last outpost was Antarctica, which then got swallowed by the ice. Wild leaps of logic to be sure, but in the absence of easy ways to go and check yourself, such theories found an audience. How does this relate back to Lake Vostok? Well, aside from being in Antarctica, Lake Vostok itself was subject to speculation about what might be hidden around it. Interestingly, scientists did detect a strong magnetic anomaly in the region of Lake Vostok. Essentially, their instruments found that part of the ice and crust had an unusual magnetic signature. The straightforward explanation for this is likely geological, perhaps a concentration of certain minerals or a difference in the Earth's crust thickness. But in the imagination of a conspiracy theorist, a magnetic anomaly in a place of mystery is practically a neon sign pointing to something important. Some said this could be the energy field of a buried city or the power plant of an alien mothership lying deep under the ice near the lake. Once you start down that path, Lake Vostok becomes less a lake and more a gateway to an under-ice world, whether that's ancient humans, aliens, or Atlanteans. Of course, mainstream science doesn't support any of these claims. As far as we know, the only things ever built at Lake Vostok are some small research structures at Vostok Station, and the only ancient artifacts are the air bubbles trapped in ice that fell as snow before human civilization even began. But these Antarctic pyramid and lost city stories show how Lake Vostok's discovery got woven into a tapestry of other fantastic ideas. Suddenly, Antarctica wasn't just about penguins and science. It was a stage for all our collective mysteries. Ancient aliens, lost cities, secret Nazi bases, yes, that's another one that often pops up, and hidden treasures. For many, Lake Vostok became a kind of focal point. If something weird was going to be found in Antarctica, surely it'd be found in that deep, dark lake or around it. And if nothing was found officially, then perhaps it was discovered and kept secret. This is the tricky thing about places so remote and inaccessible. They invite speculation because so few people can ever go and see for themselves. The magnetic anomaly and speculations. It's worth lingering for a moment on that magnetic anomaly near Lake Vostok because it exemplifies how a kernel of truth can seed a whole tree of wild theories. The anomaly is real. Scientists mapping the area found a region with a stronger magnetic field than expected, about 105 by 75 kilometers in size. One scientific hypothesis is that it might be caused by a geologic structure, perhaps a concentration of iron-rich rocks or a variation in Earth's crust. After all, the Antarctic continent has had a long and dramatic geological history. There could be all sorts of dense rocks or even meteor fragments buried down there affecting the magnetism. But if you're inclined to think outside the box, you see big magnetic anomaly, and your mind jumps to, could it be a giant metal object? Something not natural? And so, in some circles, people claimed that the magnetic anomaly might be an underground base or an alien craft frozen in place, maybe the source of all those ancient legends. There was even speculation that this anomaly might be connected to the supposed Nazi secret base 211, a myth that the Nazis built a hidden fortress in Antarctica during World War II. No evidence of that either, but it's a perennial conspiracy favorite. So now Lake Vostok's story became entangled with post-war conspiracy lore. In these tellings, perhaps the Nazis found something under the ice, like that anomaly, and that's why they were interested in Antarctica to begin with. It's a grand chain of suppositions. Take one part genuine scientific mystery, the lake, one part true but unexplained data point, the magnetic anomaly, mix with known history, Nazi Antarctic expeditions, and then spice it up with the supernatural, ancient aliens, pyramids. Voila! A rich stew of conspiracy that's almost impossible to debunk to those who want to believe it, because it connects dots across decades and disciplines in a way that feels satisfying, like a puzzle, even if the connections are invented. To an outside observer, this might all sound a bit absurd, even amusing. But for the people who propagate these theories, it's deadly serious, or at least immensely intriguing. The Antarctic Treaty, which reserves the continent for peaceful research and bans military activity, is seen by some not as a noble scientific cooperation, but as a cover story. They are hiding what's really there. Lake Vostok, in this view, was a test. Maybe the scientists were allowed to drill just enough to retrieve something or to see something, and then forced to shut up about it. Again, none of the credible scientists involved have indicated anything of the sort. Yet the mystique of Antarctica practically begs for such interpretations. This is the same place, after all, where you have the real-life mystery of things like the blood falls, a red, iron-rich liquid flowing from a glacier that looks like bleeding ice, bizarre ice shapes, and meteorites from Mars being found. Antarctica is just ripe for turning the strange but true into the perhaps true but fantastical. And fantastical is exactly where we're headed next, into perhaps the most chilling conspiracy tale to ever drift out of the frozen South, the legend of the Striders and secret experiments gone awry.